They locked her in the attic while they planned the wedding. They didn't know the Duke was the groom, and he was coming for her. The key turned in the lock with a soft click that echoed louder than any scream. Miss Ada Whitcombe pressed her palm against the attic door and listened to her aunt's footsteps fade down the stairs. Below, she could hear laughter, champagne glasses clinking, and the excited chatter of wedding preparations. But as Ada stood alone in the dusty attic, she realized with cold clarity that the wedding they were planning wasn't meant for her at all, even though the groom was coming for her. Hello, lovely. If you're enjoying this tale of deception, courage, and unexpected rescue, tap like, leave a quick comment, and subscribe, so YouTube knows to bring you more stories you'll enjoy. And if you're up for it, tell me your first name in the comments. I read every note, and it always brings a smile to my face. 1. Ada Whitcombe had learned not to panic when doors locked behind her. The attic room was exactly what she'd expected, cramped, dusty, filled with old trunks and forgotten furniture. A single small window let in weak afternoon light, filtered through London's coal smoke fog. The slanted ceiling made it impossible to stand upright, except in the centre of the room. She'd been shoved inside so quickly that her sleeve had torn on a nail. Now she stood alone, listening to the sounds of celebration filtering up through the floorboards. Ada pressed her ear against the door. Voices drifted up the stairwell, her Aunt Selwyn's commanding tone, her cousin Florence's high-pitched excitement, and multiple servants rushing about with the frantic energy that came before important guests arrived. The flowers must be perfect, Aunt Selwyn was saying. And Florence, practice your smile, not too eager, but warm enough to seem genuine. When does he arrive? Florence's voice trembled with excitement. Any moment now. The vicar will be here within the hour. Everything must be ready. Ada's stomach dropped. The wedding wasn't weeks away, as she'd assumed. It was happening now. Tomorrow at the latest. And they'd locked her away to make sure she couldn't interfere. Ada moved away from the door and surveyed her prison. 2 old trunks, a broken chair, a stack of moth-eaten blankets. The window was too small to climb through, and they were 3 floors up anyway. She could shout, but who would hear her? Who would care? She'd been living with her aunt and cousin for 3 years, ever since her parents died and left her with nothing but debts. Lady Selwyn had taken her in, not out of kindness, but out of the appearance of kindness. Ada earned her keep by managing the household accounts, tutoring Florence in subjects her cousin had no interest in learning, and remaining invisible when guests visited. It had been bearable, barely. But this was different. This was imprisonment. Ada heard footsteps on the attic stairs. The key turned, and a young maid slipped inside, carrying a tray with bread, cheese, and water. The girl kept her eyes down, refusing to meet Ada's gaze. "Mary," Ada said gently, "what's happening downstairs?" "I can't talk, miss," her ladyship said. "I know what she said, but you know this isn't right. Locking someone in an attic isn't the action of a respectable family." Mary's hands shook as she set down the tray. "I'm sorry, miss. I truly am. But I need this position. My family depends on my wages." Ada softened her voice. "I understand. I'm not asking you to help me escape. I just want to know what's going on." The maid hesitated, glancing at the open door behind her. "There's a gentleman coming, a Mr. Merritt. Miss Florence is to marry him. Tomorrow afternoon, her ladyship says. Special license and everything." "Tomorrow?" Ada's mind raced. "But Florence has never mentioned anyone named Merritt." "I don't know more than that, miss. Please don't ask me." Mary backed toward the door. "If you're going to imprison me, at least charge a reasonable rent." The maid's lips twitched almost a smile before she remembered herself and hurried out. The key turned again, and Ada was alone. She moved to the window and looked out over the smoke-dimmed street. Carriages passed below, their occupants invisible in the grey fog that rolled through London like a living thing. This was Kensington, respectable, fashionable, expensive, the kind of neighbourhood where screaming from attic windows would be ignored as embarrassing rather than investigated as criminal. Ada turned back to survey the room more carefully. If she was going to understand what was happening, she needed information. She opened the first trunk. Old dresses, yellowed letters, nothing useful. The second trunk held more promise. Beneath a layer of moth-eaten blankets, she found a small wastebasket that had been emptied but not thoroughly cleaned. Ada reached inside and pulled out a torn envelope. Her heart stopped. The letter was addressed to her, Miss Ada Whitcombe, in familiar handwriting she recognized from months ago. The seal had been broken, clumsily resealed, and the letter inside was missing. Someone had intercepted her correspondence. Ada's hands shook as she searched through the wastebasket more carefully. She found 3 more torn envelopes, all addressed to her, all opened. The pieces fell into place with horrible clarity. Someone had been writing to her, someone she'd met before, perhaps someone who'd shown interest in her rather than Florence. And Aunt Selwyn had been stealing the letters, preventing Ada from knowing. Now they were rushing to marry Florence to this Mr. Merritt before he discovered the deception. Ada sank onto one of the trunks, her mind spinning. She needed to get out. She needed to warn this man before he made a terrible mistake. But the door was locked, the window too small, and no one would help her. She was trapped. Downstairs, a commotion erupted. Carriage wheels on cobblestones, servants rushing to answer the door. Aunt Selwyn's voice rising in delighted welcome. "Mr. Merritt, how wonderful to see you. Please, come in. We've been expecting you." A male voice responded, too low for Ada to make out the words. Ada moved to the door and pressed her ear against it. She could hear movement, introductions, the rustle of coats being taken, then Florence's voice, loud and performative. "Mr. Merritt, what a pleasure. I've been counting the hours until your arrival." Ada closed her eyes. He was here. Whoever this Mr. Merritt was, he'd come for her, and they were giving him Florence instead. She raised her fist and knocked against the door, 3 deliberate, measured knocks. Then a pause. Then 3 more. Downstairs, conversation continued. No one had heard. Ada knocked again, and again, and again. Below, in the drawing room, she heard a male voice say something that made everyone laugh. Then a pause. Then footsteps slow, deliberate, moving toward the hallway. Ada held her breath and knocked 1 more time. "Ada." The voice was barely a whisper, but she heard it. Someone knew she was here. Someone was coming. 2. Hugh Mercer stood in the drawing room of the Kensington townhouse and knew immediately that something was wrong. He'd arrived as Mr. Merritt, plain coat, simple cravat, no ducal finery, because he was tired of women performing for a title rather than showing him who they truly were. The disguise had served him well in the past, weeding out those who cared more about rank than character. But this situation felt different, staged. Lady Selwyn had greeted him with the calculated warmth of someone who'd rehearsed the moment. The drawing room was dressed like a small chapel, complete with flowers, prayer books, and a nervous vicar hovering near the fireplace. Everything spoke of hasty preparation and desperate intent. And then there was Florence Selwyn. She performed charm the way she'd once performed a piano piece at the charity committee meeting, where Hugh had first met the family, loudly, inaccurately, and with unwavering confidence. She smiled too brightly, laughed too quickly, and positioned herself between Hugh and the door as if afraid he might escape. "Mr. Merritt, you must be exhausted from your journey," Lady Selwyn said, steering him toward a chair. "Let me ring for tea. Florence, dear, sit with our guest. Keep him entertained." Hugh remained standing. "Thank you, Lady Selwyn, but I was hoping to speak with Miss Ada Whitcombe. Is she well?" A flicker of something panic, calculation, crossed Lady Selwyn's face before her smile returned. "Oh, dear Ada is indisposed, I'm afraid. A terrible headache. She's resting and specifically asked not to be disturbed. You understand, I'm sure. Young ladies are so sensitive to changes in weather." "I see." Hugh kept his voice neutral. "Perhaps I might leave her a note. I'd hate for her to think I'd forgotten our arrangement." "Arrangement?" Florence's voice went sharp before Lady Selwyn silenced her with a look. "Such a kind thought," Lady Selwyn said smoothly, "but unnecessary. I'll convey your regards when she's feeling better. Now, shall we discuss the wedding preparations? The vicar is here, as you can see. We thought tomorrow afternoon would be perfect for a small, intimate ceremony." Hugh's instincts prickled. Something was very wrong. He'd met Ada Whitcombe 4 months ago at a charitable music committee meeting. While other ladies had fluttered and performed, Ada had sat in the corner with the budget ledgers, correcting his mathematics without apology, and suggesting better ways to allocate funds for the children's education program. She'd been practical, funny in a quiet way, and utterly uninterested in impressing him. When he'd asked if she played an instrument, she'd said, competently, not brilliantly. "I know the difference." He'd been charmed. They'd corresponded careful, proper letters discussing committee business that gradually revealed more personal thoughts. Ada had written about being trapped in a life that wasn't truly hers, about wanting work that mattered, about fearing she'd disappear into the role her family needed her to play. Hugh had responded honestly in ways he never did as the Duke of Kestrelford. He told her about the loneliness of his position, the performance required of nobility, the hunger for genuine connection. He'd signed his letters as Mr. Merritt and suggested cautiously, hopefully, that when the committee's work concluded, he'd like to call on her properly. Her last letter had said yes. And now she was indisposed, and her cousin was being presented like a substitute bride. Hugh moved casually toward the window, scanning the room. Ada's handwriting was visible on a household ledger left open on a side table. Her music notes, he recognized her precise notation, were folded inside a book on the mantelpiece. Small signs of her presence, carefully staged to suggest she lived here comfortably. But the absence felt wrong, deliberate. "Lady Selwyn," Hugh said carefully, "forgive my directness, but I'm confused about the timeline. In my correspondence with Miss Ada, she never mentioned an immediate wedding. In fact, our discussions suggested a much more gradual courtship." Lady Selwyn's smile didn't waver. "Young girls often mistake the nature of gentlemen's interest, Mr. Merritt. Ada is dear to us, but she can be fanciful. Florence, however, is much more grounded, more suitable for a man of your position." "My position?" Hugh raised an eyebrow. "Well, your situation, your prospects." Lady Selwyn waved a hand vaguely. "Florence understands what's required of a proper wife. Ada is wonderful, of course, but she has peculiar ideas about marriage. She wants to work, if you can imagine, manage accounts, oversee charities, hardly appropriate for a gentleman's household." Hugh felt his anger rise but kept his expression neutral. "I see. And did Ada agree to this arrangement? The wedding tomorrow, I mean?" "Oh, she's quite resigned to it. Isn't she, Florence?" Florence nodded too enthusiastically. "Absolutely. Ada is perfectly content with everything." Hugh made a decision. He turned to a young footman standing nervously near the door. "You there. How long has Miss Ada been confined to her room?" The footman's eyes widened. "Sir, answer him," Hugh said, letting authority seep into his voice for the first time. "We've not been allowed upstairs to the attic since yesterday morning, sir. Her ladyship's orders." The room went silent. The attics? Hugh's voice was dangerously quiet. Lady Selwyn recovered quickly. "A misunderstanding. Ada requested privacy, and we simply—" Hugh held up his hand. "Stop." He listened. The house was old, and sound carried strangely through the walls and floorboards. Their faint but deliberate 3 knocks. Pause. 3 more knocks. Someone was trying to communicate. Hugh looked up at the ceiling, then back at Lady Selwyn. "I believe Miss Ada is trying to tell us something." "Nonsense. The old house settles." "I'm going upstairs," Hugh said. "Now." Lady Selwyn moved to block his path. "Mr. Merritt, I must insist. And I must insist on seeing Miss Ada immediately. Either you provide me with the key to wherever you've locked her, or I'll break down every door in this house until I find her." The threat hung in the air. Lady Selwyn calculated quickly, weighing scandal against control. Before she could respond, Hugh turned to the housekeeper, who'd been hovering in the doorway. "The keys to the attic rooms. Now." The woman glanced at Lady Selwyn, then at Hugh's face. Whatever she saw there made her decision. She pulled a ring of keys from her belt and handed them over. "3rd floor, sir. Last door on the left." Hugh took the stairs 2 at a time, his heart pounding. Behind him, he heard Lady Selwyn's protests and Florence's confused questions. But he didn't stop. The attic hallway was narrow and dim. He found the door and fitted the key into the lock. It turned with a soft click. The door swung open. Ada Whitcombe stood in the centre of the cramped room, her hair pinned but messy, her sleeves rolled up, her dress dusty. She looked tired and angry, but her eyes were bright with determination. For a long moment, they stared at each other. Then Ada spoke, her voice dry and steady despite everything. "How kind of you to visit. I'd offer tea, but I'm fresh out of kettles." Hugh felt something tight in his chest loosen. She was all right. Imprisoned, yes, but unbroken. "You're laughing," he said, surprised. "If I don't, I'll start throwing trunks." Ada gestured at the furniture around her. "And I suspect your coat is too expensive to risk splinters." Hugh stepped into the room, leaving the door open behind him. "Are you hurt?" "Only my pride, and my opinion of my relatives." Ada moved to the trunk where she'd left the torn envelopes. "They've been intercepting your letters, all of them. I didn't know you'd written until I found these in the wastebasket." Hugh took the envelopes, his jaw tightening as he recognized his own handwriting. "How long have you been locked in here?" "Since yesterday afternoon. Long enough to understand what they're planning." Ada met his eyes. "They mean to marry Florence to you tomorrow. They've locked me away, so I can't interfere or tell you the truth. The truth being that I'm the one you came for, that your letters were meant for me, not her, that they've been lying to you from the moment you arrived." Ada's voice stayed calm, but Hugh could see the anger beneath. "I assume you've met Florence by now. Did she seem like someone who'd discuss budget allocations and social reform in her correspondence?" Despite everything, Hugh smiled. "She did not." "Then you know." Hugh moved closer, careful not to crowd her in the small space. "Ada, I need to tell you something. My name isn't actually Merritt." Ada raised an eyebrow. "I'd worked that much out. Gentlemen who travel under false names usually have something to hide. My real name is Hugh Mercer, and I am the Duke of Kestrelford." The silence stretched. Ada stared at him, processing. Then she laughed a short, incredulous sound. "So the house has been lying to impress a duke. and chose the wrong woman to lock away. I would have chosen you, regardless of what they planned, Hugh said quietly. Title or no title. That's why I hid it. I wanted to know you'd choose me for myself, not for the coronet. Ada's expression softened. And now you know they've been keeping me prisoner while parading my cousin as a substitute. Quite the courtship reveal. Quite. Hugh held out his hand. Will you walk downstairs with me? In daylight? Properly? Not sneaking out like a thief? Ada took his hand, her grip firm and sure. I'd be delighted. They were halfway to the door when they heard footsteps on the landing. Lady Selwyn appeared, her face flushed with anger and calculation. Mr. Merritt, or whoever you are, I demand you step away from my niece immediately. She's unwell, confused, and you're taking advantage. No, Hugh said simply, I'm not. He guided Ada past her aunt and down the stairs, refusing to let go of her hand, ready for whatever came next. 3. The drawing-room fell silent when Ada and Hugh entered together. Florence stood by the fireplace, her carefully arranged smile faltering. The vicar clutched his prayer book, looking deeply uncomfortable. A handful of servants had gathered in the doorway, drawn by the commotion. Lady Selwyn rushed in behind them, her composure cracking. This is outrageous. Ada has been ill, and this man has forced his way into a private family matter. Ada doesn't look ill to me, Hugh said calmly. He still held Ada's hand, and she let him, drawing strength from the contact. She looks like someone who's been unlawfully confined against her will. How dare you? Lady Selwyn hissed. We took her in when she had nothing. We gave her a home, food, clothing, and in return, you made me invisible, Ada said quietly. The room went still. I kept your accounts. I tutored Florence. I managed your household while you told everyone I was your charity project. I accepted that because I had nowhere else to go. But intercepting my correspondence, locking me in an attic, that's not charity, Aunt. That's imprisonment. Florence found her voice. Mother, what is she talking about? I thought Mr. Merritt was courting me. You said, be quiet, Florence. Lady Selwyn's mask slipped further. She turned to Hugh, trying one last time to regain control. Mr. Merritt, surely we can discuss this reasonably. Ada is overwrought. She's never handled stress well. If you'll just give us a moment to settle her. My name, Hugh said clearly, is not Mr. Merritt. He let the words hang in the air. I am Hugh Mercer, Duke of Kestrelford, and I came here to court Miss Ada Whitcombe, with whom I've been corresponding for 4 months. Any suggestion that I intended to court Miss Florence Selwyn is a fabrication. The colour drained from Lady Selwyn's face. Florence made a small, strangled sound. The vicar dropped his prayer book. Hugh continued, his voice steady and cold. I travelled under a false name because I wanted to know that any woman I courted valued me as a man, not as a title. Miss Ada's letters showed me exactly that. She was honest, practical, and completely disinterested in impressing anyone. That's why I came. But you never said, Florence started. I never said anything to you at all, Miss Selwyn. We've never corresponded. We've barely spoken beyond pleasantries at a single committee meeting. Hugh's gaze turned back to Lady Selwyn. But you knew, didn't you? You intercepted my letters to Ada. You saw an opportunity to marry your daughter to a duke, and you took it, even if it meant imprisoning your niece. Lady Selwyn tried to salvage the situation. Think of the scandal, Your Grace. If this story gets out the confusion, the misunderstanding, it will damage everyone involved. Florence's reputation will be ruined. Your own standing might suffer. Surely we can come to an arrangement that protects all parties. An arrangement? Ada's voice was sharp. You mean more lies? I mean pragmatism, Ada. You've always been practical. Think about what's best for the family. Ada pulled her hand from Hugh's and stepped forward. She was dusty, dishevelled, and angrier than she'd ever been in her life. But her voice stayed steady. You locked me in an attic, Aunt. You stole my letters. You were planning to deceive a duke into marrying your daughter by pretending she was me. And now you want me to be practical? Ada shook her head. No, I will not be bartered, not even for the comfort of silence. Hugh felt pride surge through him. This was the woman he'd come for, strong, honest, unafraid. Lady Selwyn tried one last desperate play. Your Grace, my niece is emotional right now. She doesn't understand the complexities of society. But if you'll consider Florence, she's been trained for this life. She understands how to be a duchess. Ada has always been too independent, too peculiar. She won't fit into your world. Then I'll change my world to fit her, Hugh said simply. The words fell into silence. Hugh turned to Ada, his expression serious. I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. Ada met his eyes. Go on. Do you want to leave this house? Not because I'm asking, not because you feel obligated, but because you truly want to? Ada didn't hesitate. Yes. Do you want to continue our courtship, knowing now who I am, what that means, what it would require of you? Ada paused, considering. I want to continue getting to know you, as Hugh, not as a duke. I liked the man in the letters. I'm not sure yet how I feel about the title. Hugh smiled, real and genuine. That's exactly the answer I hoped for. He turned back to Lady Selwyn. Miss Ada will be leaving with me today. She'll stay at my mother's townhouse in Mayfair, where she'll have proper chaperonage and protection. You will not contact her, follow her, or attempt to interfere in any way. If you do, I will ensure that every detail of this incident, the intercepted letters, the unlawful confinement, the attempted fraud, becomes known to every influential family in London. You wouldn't, Lady Selwyn breathed. Try me. Florence finally found her voice, her perfect facade crumbling. Mother, you told me he was courting me. You said Ada didn't want him. You said, I said what was necessary, Lady Selwyn snapped. Then, realizing she'd revealed too much, she tried to soften her tone. Florence, you must understand. This was for your future, for our family's security. But Florence was staring at her mother, as if seeing her clearly for the first time. You lied to me. You made me lie to him. And you locked Ada in an attic. It was temporary. Just until after the wedding. There is no wedding, Hugh said firmly. He offered Ada his arm. Shall we go? Ada took his arm. Her decision made. I need to pack my things. I'll send servants to collect them tomorrow, Hugh said. Right now, I want you out of this house. As they moved toward the door, Lady Selwyn made one final attempt. Ada, if you leave like this, you'll have nothing. No family, no home, no reputation. You'll be ruined. Ada paused and looked back. I'd rather be ruined and free than comfortable and caged. She walked out of the house with Hugh, into the coal smoke fog of London, and didn't look back. 4. Hugh's mother's townhouse in Mayfair was everything. Lady Selwyn's home pretended to be elegant, warm, and genuinely welcoming. The Dowager Duchess of Kestrelford was a practical woman in her 60s, with sharp eyes and a kind smile. She took one look at Ada's torn sleeve and dusty dress and said, You must be the young lady my son has been writing about for months. Welcome. Let's get you fed and cleaned up, and then you can tell me everything. 2 hours later, Ada sat in a comfortable guest room, wearing borrowed clothes and drinking tea that was actually hot. A maid had helped her wash and pin her hair properly. The room had windows that opened, a door with no lock, and books on every available surface. It felt like freedom. Hugh knocked softly and entered when Ada called out. He changed into fresh clothes and looked less like Mr. Merritt and more like what he actually was, a duke in his own home. "How are you?" he asked. Overwhelmed, grateful, confused. Ada set down her teacup. "Your mother has been extraordinarily kind. She's pleased to finally meet you. I may have mentioned you in my letters home more than once." Hugh sat in the chair across from her, maintaining proper distance. "Ada, we need to talk about what happens next." "I know." Ada took a breath. "You came to London expecting a straightforward courtship. Instead, you got family drama, attempted fraud, and a woman with no reputation and no prospects. You've been very kind, but I won't hold you to anything. You can walk away from this situation without any obligation to me." Hugh was quiet for a moment. "Is that what you want?" "I want you to have a choice. The same choice you tried to give me by travelling as Mr. Merritt." "Then let me choose." Hugh leaned forward. "I came to London because your letters made me laugh, made me think, made me want to meet the woman who corrected my math without apology and told me that charity work mattered more than charity balls. That woman was you, Ada, not Florence, not some performed version of yourself. You." "But you're a duke," Ada said quietly. "I know nothing about being a duchess. I can manage household accounts and organize charity committees, but I don't know how to host grand dinners or navigate society politics. Your aunt was right. I'm too independent, too peculiar." "Good." Hugh's voice was firm. "I don't want a wife who'll perform for society. I want a partner who'll tell me when I'm wrong and laugh at me when I'm being pompous. Someone who'll actually care about the work of the duchy, not just the title." "You barely know me," Ada protested. "I know you well enough to know I want to know you better. Properly. Without your aunt intercepting letters or locking you in attics." Hugh smiled. "What do you say, Ada? Will you let me court you? Honestly, this time, with no disguises and no pressure. If at any point you decide I'm not what you want, you can walk away. My mother will help you establish yourself independently, funds, connections, whatever you need. You'll never have to go back to your aunt's house or depend on anyone who doesn't respect you." Ada felt tears prick her eyes. No one had ever offered her real choice before, real freedom. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "Because you deserve it. And because," Hugh hesitated, "because I came to London hoping to find someone who'd see me as Hugh, not as Kestrelford. You did that in your letters. You were honest when everyone else was performing. That's rare, Ada. That's valuable. And I'm not foolish enough to let it go without at least trying." Ada wiped her eyes. "I want to say yes, but I'm scared." "Of what?" "Of disappointing you. Of not being enough for this world. Of losing myself trying to become what everyone else thinks a duchess should be." Hugh stood and moved to the window, looking out at the London fog. "Can I tell you what my father told me before he died?" Ada nodded. "He said the duchy would survive regardless of who I married. Buildings stand, lands produce, crops, people pay their rents. The mechanics continue. But a life, a real life, requires choosing someone who makes you want to be better." Hugh turned back to her. "Your letters made me want to be better, Ada. More honest. Less concerned with performance. Actually engaged with the work that matters. If you marry me, I'm not asking you to become someone else. I'm asking you to stay exactly who you are and help me become someone worth being." Ada stood, her decision crystallizing. "I want to try." Not marriage, not yet, but courtship. Real courtship, where we actually get to know each other. Relief flooded Hugh's face. That's all I'm asking. And I want to work, Ada added firmly. Whatever else being a duchess means, I won't give up managing things, organising things, making myself useful. I'm counting on it. The duchy's charitable programmes are a disaster. I've been hoping someone with actual organisational skills might take them on. Ada felt herself smile, really smile, for the first time in days. Are you offering me a job, Your Grace? I'm offering you a life, Miss Whitcombe. One where you get to be yourself. They stood there in comfortable silence, the fog outside pressing against the windows, the warm lamplight making the room feel safe and real. So what happens now? Ada asked. Now we do this properly. I call on you here under my mother's chaperonage. We attend events together. We talk, we laugh, we argue about budget allocations. We let society see that I'm courting you by choice, not by scandal. And when we're both ready, if we're both ready, we'll make it official. And if people ask about the attic incident, we tell them the truth. Your aunt is a controlling woman who tried to deceive us both. Anyone who judges you for being her victim isn't worth your time. Ada moved to the window beside him. Outside, London was grey and sooty, the fog rolling through the streets like smoke. But up here, in this warm room with this honest man, the world felt clearer than it had in years. Thank you, she said quietly, for coming for me. I came for you before I even knew I could hope, Hugh admitted. Don't waste it. Be yourself. Ada laughed a real, startled sound. Then don't waste my honesty. Be good. Hugh smiled. Deal. 5. 3 months later, Ada stood in a small chapel wearing a simple ivory dress and holding a bouquet of winter roses. The courtship had been everything she'd hoped for and nothing like she'd expected. Hugh had called on her every afternoon, sometimes staying for hours while they worked through the duchy's charitable accounts together. He'd introduced her to his world gradually, never pushing, always making sure she felt comfortable. Ada had learned that being a duchess didn't mean erasing herself. It meant using her skills, her practical mind, her organisational talents, her genuine care for people in new ways. She'd reorganised 3 charitable programmes, created a budget system that actually made sense, and earned the respect of Hugh's staff by treating them like people rather than servants. Society had gossiped, of course. The story of the attic imprisonment had spread, but Hugh's handling of it had transformed the narrative. Instead of being seen as a scandal, Ada was viewed as a victim who'd been rescued. Lady Selwyn had quietly retreated from London society, her reputation in tatters. Florence had eventually married a country squire, far from the glittering world she'd once craved. Ada didn't celebrate their downfall, but she didn't mourn it either. She'd moved forward into a life that was truly hers. Now, in this small chapel, with only close friends and family present, Ada was about to become the Duchess of Kestrelford. Hugh waited at the altar, his face bright with joy. His mother sat in the front row, beaming. Ada's old friend from the charity committee gave her an encouraging nod. No grand society wedding, no performance, just 2 people choosing each other. The vicar began the service. Ada spoke her vows clearly, meaning every word. Hugh's voice was steady and sure. When he slipped the ring onto her finger, his hands were warm and steady. I present to you, the vicar said with satisfaction, the Duke and Duchess of Kestrelford. Hugh kissed her tender, genuine, full of promise. Later, at the small reception in the Kestrelford townhouse, Ada found herself standing by the window watching the guests mingle. Hugh's mother was introducing her to a duchess who ran women's education programs. Hugh was deep in conversation with the charity committee chairman about expanding their work. Having second thoughts, Hugh's voice came from behind her. Ada turned and smiled. Not a single one. Though, I might need you to explain again why duchesses have to attend quite so many dinner parties. Because we need to maintain social connections that let us do the work we actually care about. Hugh handed her a glass of champagne. Though if you want, we can skip Lady Hartfield's ball next week. I hear the entertainment is always dreadful. Skip it, and miss the opportunity to correct Lord Pemberton's terrible mathematics when he discusses charitable giving? Ada raised an eyebrow. Never, Hugh laughed. There's my Duchess, your peculiar, independent Duchess, who's going to reorganize your entire charity system, and probably offend half the aristocracy in the process. Perfect. Hugh took her hand. Ada, I need to tell you something. That sounds ominous. Not ominous, just true. His expression grew serious. I fell in love with you through your letters. Before I ever saw you, before I knew your circumstances, before any of the drama, I fell in love with your mind, your honesty, your complete inability to pretend to be anything you're not. Everything that happened afterward, the attic, the confrontation, the courtship, just proved that my love. Really? He nodded. Would you marry me, Ada? Ada felt her heart flutter. She smiled. 1,000,000 times. If this story gave you a smile or a sigh, tap like, leave a quick comment, and subscribe so YouTube knows to bring you more stories you'll enjoy.